All right. So day four. So day four, like I said last time, we were actually done with the unit. So this is our last little clip for this unit, and it's going to just be a general review. And this one really is not much to review on it. A lot of this unit is pretty basic. This is probably one of the easier units because it is pretty straightforward information. It's not really that complex. So the review's pretty short, and really all I do is I just use the same review questions that I went over on each day's task, and I just kind of re-go over that. In some of our later units, whenever we have a lot more complicated information, I'll be asking like some very specific questions and going over very specific things inside the review. But for right now, it's just more of a conceptual idea. So day one, just kind of revamp over what we talked about there. Remember, you're going to need to make sure that you know the seven characteristics of life and how to apply them. Remember the seven characteristics of life. Uh, I might give you a scenario to where I'm asking between two different items. I might uh, ask you why would a rock not be considered a living thing, and based on the prompts inside the answer you have to figure out which one that might be. I might give you something about about a river, or I might give you several different examples and inside the multiple choice answers, and you'll have to pick out which statement is describing a living organism and which one is not. So make sure you do look over those seven characteristics of life, and please look at those examples as well, because a lot of those examples are the type of examples that I'll use that you'll see in your guided notes, or if you just want to watch that video again on the day one video. And don't forget that whole being able to distinguish each characteristic by applying it in the real world situation. Being able to do number day one's information will also help you out in making sure that you remember about viruses, which is our day two's review. That's part of it. So, as a virus, you're going to need to make sure that we remember that a virus is not a living thing. We need to make sure that we understand why it is not considered a living organism. It's not considered a living organism on a few basic reasons. It cannot reproduce on its own. It must have a host cell in order to reproduce. Um, it it can't undergo any type of metabolism, any type of energy. Can't gain its own energy, and it also is not going to be able to break down food or anything like that, or make its own. So the energy requirement as well, and of course, it also doesn't have cell structures. You know, it's not a cell membrane, a cell wall. Remember, it does have an outer coating, but that outer coating is called a protein coat. Um, don't get confused by thinking that a virus does not have DNA. It does. And that's one of the reasons why. And there's some other things about the fact that it can evolve and it does. The DNA changes, and so that's the reason why it's kind of up in the air. It's almost like on the seesaw. Some microbiologists or virologists, say that it is living, and there is some dispute here. But of course, for sake of this class and the level at which that we're at, whenever in our education, for right now, based on the information that we have, we're going to go with it being not considered a living organism. Moving on from that, we also had the three tenets, and really the word tenets, we're talking about the three parts that make up the cell theory. Make sure you do know those. Also, make sure you know which scientists contributed to it and how they contributed to it. Remember, those are the four scientists. There is some basic information you'll need to know about each one of those. Please look back at that video. Make sure you do know those. Remember, on that day two's video, I did talk about Hook and about how, a lot of times some teachers will sit there and teach it as he's the one that came up with the first cell theory, and he was not. That the first and the second tenet of the cell theory was developed. Um, by Schleiden and Schwann. While yes, if it was not for Hooke, then the first tenet of the cell theory wouldn't be there, because the first tenet of the cell theory talks about how it's the basic unit of life, the cell is, and Hooke was the first person to discover the cell and name the cell. So while his work led to Schleiden and Schwann saying that all living things, that is the basic unit of life, Hooke was not the one that actually came up with that part, but he did inspire the first tenet of the cell theory. All right. And so that's all of day 2. And then day 3. Day 3, basically, we're talking about the levels of organization for the most part. Make sure, so you'll have a listing requirement here. Make sure that you're able to list them from least complex to most complex, but also from most complex to the least. Please read those questions carefully, because what it would basically say is, I would just ask you, what's the order of them from least to most, or from most to least? So make sure you read that. Most students, if they do miss this question, it's because they read it too quickly. Because it's so easy for us just to say, oh, he's asking from least to most, no big deal. But I will go and let you know, I do have questions in there where I'm asking from most to least. And while some people might say, oh, that's a trick question, it's really not a trick question. It's also making sure that you're reading the question thoroughly and correctly. I'll also give you some examples of it. I might give you written example, such as I might be talking about a neuron. Well, a neuron is a nerve cell, and I do talk about that in that day three's actual regular notes. So I might give you some examples. I might ask you to pick out which one's the organ, or I might give you images and pictures of it. So please be ready for that. Um, and then also being able to distinguish them from a written prompt. That goes back to like the example I'll give you in the notes about red blood cells, and or not red blood cells, but blood in general, and how it's made up of the different ones, of the different types of cells and platelets in the different parts, and how that makes, and for that reason, that makes blood being distinguished as being a tissue. I also give you examples, of course, of organs and why organs an organ, and things like that, and kind of tell you how to break that down. As far as cell specialization goes, basically what we need to understand here is that cells inside your body are different. You have a lot of different types of cells. And while they may look different and even have different functions, they all have the same DNA. So they're just reading a different part that tells them what to do. So basically, their DNA, they have a different boss that they're looking at, even though they all have the same DNA. Um, don't forget, whenever you're reviewing for these, so I know I told you, about some different prompts and different images that you might see. That's where those quizzes comes in handy, that you have links to on Canvas to be able to get to each one of them. So please use that to get to it, um, so that you can actually see some question format of this. And I do have that broken down by the different pieces of information as well. Anyway, good luck, study hard, and I hope you do well on the test.